put a new screen shield on my phone and it's harder to get the thing to work right now. How's everyone doing today? Not sure why my tablet's giving me problems. There we go. Glad we have our visitors with us this morning. Always welcome back here at Cloverdale. Glad to see everyone that is out with us today, though. It's always wonderful to have a great crowd. Thursday isn't really that important, is it? I mean, Thanksgiving. With that in mind, I thought we would do a lesson to hopefully prepare us for what we're going to be doing with our family and kind of keep in mind what this day might be better off served as. I know that it's a day of thanksgiving for all that God has given and the things, at least it's the way it was understood in the early days of our country, as they were having this opportunity to be thankful for the land and the various things that the land gave. However, I want us to think on the spiritual side of things this morning, and I want us to think about what God has given. And so I want to be able to do and to see the true love that God has given unto us. Because it's so amazing. When you think about God, when you think about His Son, when you think about the sacrifice and all the things that have taken place in your life, isn't it a moment to be thankful? We gather around the table. We partake of the bread, which represents His Son's body. We partake of the cup, which represents the blood that was shed while He was on that cross for us. Truly, the reason, according to what we find in Scripture, that we come together is for this reason. That way we have a remembrance of the things that He's done. We see the things that God did for us in allowing His Son to come to this earth and die on a cross. We're going to look at this a little bit more in depth as we get to that point in our lesson, but I want us to truly focus and have understanding of what it means to be thankful. Thanksgiving. Psalm chapter 136 and verse 1. Yes, it's only one verse. The whole chapter is a lot longer than that, but I just want to read that one verse. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good, for His mercy endures forever. Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His mercy endures forever. What are some things that you're thankful for? What are some things that are going on in your life that you look to God and you say, thank you? On Thanksgiving, I may have told y'all this before, on Thanksgiving, as we gather around that table as a family, one of the things that we do through the meal is we each name something that we are thankful for that year. And one of the most common, obviously, that is given out is thankful for our family. Because that's just true. We're always thankful for our family. But there's other things that come out that we're thankful for. And I want you to just think about that for just a moment. Before we really dive into this lesson, I want you to take just a moment and I want you to think about what you're thankful for. What is going on in your life right now that you are thankful for God for the things that are occurring? Or what are you thankful for that has led you to the point that you are in right now? What are you thankful for? Just take a couple of seconds and think about that. Okay. Now that you have that in the back of your mind, I want you to just take and file that for a second. And I want you to think about what we look at this morning on being thankful. The first thing that you and I need to get into a realization is what God has done. And so the one thing that you and I need to realize is how amazing and how powerful our God is. We need to learn to be thankful for creation. We need to learn to look at what God has done. Think about creation for just a moment. You read over in Genesis chapters 1 and 2 about the creation. And one of the things that just completely mind-blowing to me is the understanding of what God did. Because you read in the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth days, and even into the sixth day, and it says, God said, and He spoke something into existence. Whether it be the light, whether it be the firmament, whether it be the land and the water, whether it be the sun, moon, and the stars, whether it be the vegetation, whether it be the plants that we talked about, the vegetation, or the birds and the fish, and ultimately into day 6 where we read that He created the beasts of the earth. But then, in chapter 2, we see an expansion of part of that creation. And in chapter 2, we read about where God created man. And God didn't just speak man into existence. It says, as you get into Genesis 2, it says that He took and He formed from the dust of the ground this body. Now, outside of anything else, that body's just there. It's a body. But then it says He breathed into it the breath of life, giving life to man. 2 things occur to my mind as I think about this. Number 1, the first thing that occurs is the awe-inspiring understanding we have of what we mean to God. As you get to the end of chapter 2, it talks about everything, whether it was a creeping animal or whether it was a bird or a fish, or even the sights that you and I see as we open up our eyes and we look around us. Everything was created for us. Everything in creation was made for man. I've been in areas where there was no light at night. And being able to look and see the stars in the sky without having anything diluted because of light. Because let's face it, the closer you are in cities with all the lights of the city, the less you see of it. But when you see the beauty that God has and all the stars that are made, God did that for us. I remember, and I may have said this to y'all, we went on vacation one time and we went to Chattanooga, and one of the things that we had as part of our trip there was that we could go to the IMAX theater there in Chattanooga. I'm not a big IMAX fan. I'm just going to let you know that. And it was one of those situations that was so neat because we watched this IMAX theater video of the Hubble telescope. Highly recommend that if you have opportunity to watch that show, that you watch it. Or to go on to NASA's site that they have with the Hubble telescope and just view the pictures that the Hubble telescope has brought back to us from deep space. It is so amazing in the beauty. But I remember there was one part in that movie that just completely blew my mind, because talking about creation, talking about what God has done, there was a galaxy that the Hubble telescope sent back a photo of that could fit on the head of a pin. A galaxy that small brought back to us. And you see the different universe and the different areas like what we have within our own solar system of the plants that are there. I was completely blown away by what they said. And as I'm watching this movie, as I'm sitting there viewing these amazing pictures that have been sent back, my only question I had was, how Could anyone think this happened by accident? If you have opportunity, I'm telling you, if you have any type of opportunity, go in and look at the photos sent back from the Hubble telescope. Because these are photos that are so far out, we've never reached until these photos came back. It's amazing. But God did that for us. He created all of that for us. I hear people all the time say, how can you believe that we are the only things in the universe? And I said to an individual, I said, even if God created other beings in other part of the universe, there's something you need to understand. And here's what it is. Going into chapter 2, God created man, but he didn't just create man. He took his time with man. He could have spoke us into existence. Boom, we're there. But he fashioned man. Breathed into man the breath of life. He could have done anything. But he took his time. And if there is any creature that is out there in this universe that we've not come in contact with, or even if we have, as people believe we have, I guarantee you they do not have the choice that you and I have. Because Jesus died on a cross for us. God took his time with man, and we are the only creature, according to what we find in the Scripture, we are the only creature that God gave choice to. That's something to seriously consider in what God did. Everything was made for us. It's amazing in what we do. But it's not just made for us. God created everything for himself as well. Oh, well, wait a minute. How did God create it for himself? He already knew what he could do. It's not about what he can do. It's about what he wanted to share with us. Besides, you look over at Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. It says all things were made by him and for him. He's talking about everything. That's including you and I. Everything in creation was made for us. We were made for God. God made us special. And we need to understand that. So we need to be thankful for creation, because without God, there is nothing. I hear people all the time say, man, if it wasn't for God, can you imagine the chaos that would be reigning in this world? If it wasn't for God, there would be no chaos in this world to reign, because there would be no world. We need to understand just exactly what God has done and why. Creation was done for us. God made it, and we need to be thankful for it. Not only do we need to be thankful for creation, we need to be thankful for our family. Think about your family for just a moment. Josh, you can be thankful for the family. Okay, he's having issues with the technical side of things. Normal. But think about your family for just a moment. Would you trade your family for anything? Be honest with yourself. I heard somebody one time, they said, man, if I could have traded in my brother when I was younger, I'd have done it in a heartbeat. Really? Would you really have done that? My sister and I, we had our moments when we were kids, but you know what? I wouldn't have traded my sister for anything. She may have traded me. Now, that's a different story. I don't know about her side. I can't speak for her. I can only speak for me. But I wouldn't have traded her for anything. Why? Because my sister was something special to me, because she was my sister. Just like, and take note on this as we talk about family, because it's not just family that we're talking about a physical. Think about your mom. Think about your dad. Think about your grandparents. All of them are part of you. All of them had something to do with your raising and your upbringing, especially if you knew them. And you may not have known them, and you may not have got to meet them, but I can guarantee you, they still had a part of your upbringing, whether you realize it or not, because they brought up your mom or your dad. Which means they were part of them, which brings that to they are part of you. Our background is so important. Any of you ever really done a background of your family? I mean, you got all these different things that you can do. One of the things that come into my mind immediately is Ancestry.com. You can go in and you can type in information and it'll just boom, there you go. It's got this, well, it may take a little longer than boom, but you got all of this information about your family. It's right there at your fingertips. You can learn stuff about you that could blow your mind. You can see things about your family that you never knew. And all of that is part of you. But there's something a little bit more important that we need to understand about family, and that goes into the spiritual side of things as well. Because we're family. And each of you means something to me, just as I hope I mean something to you. More than just the preacher. I want us to have that connection. I want us to have the fellowship and the love and the camaraderie that we would have. Does that mean we're going to get along all the time, every day of the week? Well, probably not, especially the longer we hang out with each other. We're going to start seeing those weaknesses that your siblings saw and that you saw in your siblings. We're going to have issues, but it's not about the issues. It's about how we handle those issues. It's about how we come together and we resolve those issues. Man, my sister and I, we would have moments where we did fight. I don't remember it. But I'm told quite often and reminded that when we were younger, those of you that are older, that are my age, y'all are going to probably remember. Y'all remember when the Tonka toys may have been real small, but they were made of metal? I was told I'd pin my sister and brother into the corner and I'd throw my Tonka toys at them. Hey, I don't know why I would have done it. They say I was upset with them or I didn't get my way or something. I was younger than they were. But we had that relationship. And my sister and I wouldn't trade the relationship that we have for one another. Does my sister have faults? Oh, yes, definitely. Do I have faults? Completely. In Ephesians, in chapter 6, Paul, writing to the Ephesians, gives an understanding of the family. He says, children, obey your parents. There's a purpose of that. And he actually goes on and he says it's first commandment with promise, because you can live long on the earth. What a lot of people don't realize is if you go back in and you search in the Old Testament, if parents had an unruly child that they could not deal with, the parents would take that child to the elders of the town. And the elders of the town would take that child out of the town or out of the city, and he would be stoned. Think about how we deal with unruly children today. It's there. First time it was pointed out to me, I went, wow. But why? Because the unruliness wasn't normal. Yes, children are at moments unruly. They're disobedient. They have issues. But we're able to correct those situations, aren't we? And when we don't correct them, you can see what happens by looking at our society. But it also says, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. What does that mean? That means we teach our children what God desires us to teach our children so that they understand who God is. And we don't just do things that causes them to rebel against us. That's the idea that he's bringing out when he says, do not provoke them to wrath. That means don't go overboard in trying to get them to rebel against you. Basically. There's a lot deeper meaning to it than that, but you get the idea of what I'm saying. And then there's my favorite one. And that's not found in chapter 6. It's actually in chapter 5. And that is, husbands, love your wives as you would love yourself. Wives, honor your husband. You know why God never has to tell the wife to love her husband? Because the emotional connection between the wife and the husband, the wife shows her love all the time. She's wired that way. But the husband has to be reminded to love his wife. Why? Because we're wired totally different. If you think I'm joking on this, wives, think about your husband for just a moment. They're wired differently than you. They think differently than you. They respond to situations differently than you. Do they not? You can do this, yes. I'm right. Because God wired men a certain way, and He wired women a certain way. And there is nothing wrong with that, because guess what we find in creation as we look at what really happened? Remember Adam? Adam in chapter 2, we find that God caused a deep sleep to fall upon him. And then it says He took the rib from Adam and He fashioned from that rib Eve, the first woman. And He says that Eve was made as a helpmeet. Now what that word brings understanding to is she was the thing that completed Adam. Adam was not complete without Eve, and Eve was not complete without Adam. Because of the way God made them. And we have to keep that in understanding. I joke around quite often. Do you know why woman is called woman? Because when Adam opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was her, and he said, "Whoa, man!" And you'll catch up to that later. You see, that's what completed Adam. But God has to remind man to love his wife. Because that's the way we're wired. Those things kind of at times take a back seat, it seems, in our lives. But the wife always is there. And then the area I want to spend the last bit of time with is being thankful for salvation. Why? We need to be thankful for salvation because God loved us enough that He not only created us, not only gave us a family, but He gave us His Son on a cross. And I want to really pay attention. I want to break this down. Now, you can go into any of the Gospels and you can read about what Christ did. But I have a feeling that quite often what takes place is we get in and we read about what Christ did, but we don't really see what Christ did. It's like, I don't know. We go in and we read it and we're still separated from it. So I wanted to bring it to life. I want us to see it. So here's why we need to do that. Jesus, it starts in the night that Jesus is in the upper room with His disciples. This is the night that He's going to be betrayed. And the one that betrays Him is even there during the Passover feast time. And of course we see Jesus initiate what we call the Lord's Supper now. The communion that you and I have. The bread which represents His body, the cup which represents His blood. Jesus initiated that. That's why it's so important for us to partake of it. Jesus taught His disciples a little bit more in-depth stuff. Matthew says they sang a hymn and they left the upper room. They're going to travel to the garden. And you can remember that night, can't you? They traveled to the garden. John chapter 17 is a prayer that I actually like to call the Lord's Prayer more than anything else because that's Jesus praying. And in that prayer, Jesus prayed for three things. I don't know if you've ever noticed it. I'm sure you have. But Jesus prayed for three things. Number one, it starts off he's praying for himself. Number two, he prays for the disciples. And number three, he prays for us. And I've always pictured, now I may be wrong in this, but I've always pictured that Jesus had this prayer kind of on the road to the garden, because it seems that he gets to the garden after this prayer according to John. But it seems to me, and I may be wrong, but it seems to me that he did this after they left the upper room. So I don't know if they stopped along the way, or if Jesus just kind of had this conversation with God on the way to the garden, or what the situation is. But then he gets to the garden. And as they go into the garden, they get to a certain point, and he stops the group, and he tells the majority of them, he says, I want y'all to stop here. And he takes three, Peter, James, and John, and he goes a little bit deeper into the garden. And he tells them, you stop here, watch and pray with me. And then he says he goes a little deeper himself, and he falls to his knees. That's how I picture this. He falls to his knees, and he prays because he was in earnest need. Now, what Jesus is doing in the garden is preparing himself for what he's about to do and what he's about to go through. And he prays. And it seems like a little short prayer as we read it. Lord, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but yours be done. Seems like a little small prayer, doesn't it? And it says he got up and he went back, and the disciples, I'm almost certain I could say with consistency that this prayer was longer than that, but that was the meat of it. He goes and he finds his three disciples that he left asleep, and he says, can y'all not watch and pray? Please, watch and pray with me. And he goes in and he prays again the same prayer. And he comes out again and he finds them again asleep. Now here's where things change a little bit, depending on how you read the Gospels. But it really doesn't change. It's all the same. It's the way it's written out in some of the Gospels that makes people think, oh, well, these were written differently. So we're not sure how. Here's how it goes, okay? On the third time, Jesus goes in. And when he goes in, he prays the third time. He comes out. And when he comes out, now some of the Gospels say that the crowd met him. But if you read John, I love the way John breaks this down. He comes out and he looks at him and he says, okay, I need y'all to wake up. It's time. Jesus is now ready for what he's about to do. And he goes out and he meets this crowd that's coming at him, according to John. He goes to them. He doesn't let them come to him. He goes to them. And he asks them, who are you here for? He knew the answer. Who are you here for? We're here for Jesus. Oh, well, I'm the one you see. And it says they backed up from him. And he asks them again, who are you here for? We're here for Jesus. I'm him. Tell you what, here's what I need you to do. I will go with you if you will let them go. And they let him go. And Jesus goes with the smile. Now, two of his disciples are going to follow with him. Like I said, it's amazing when you really get to see how this plays out. Two of them go with him to the high priest. One of them is named, that's Peter. We know that situation. Peter is asked if, you're one of them, and he says 3 times he denied him. And at one point it says he even started cussing. Then you have the other disciple. The one that probably got Peter in was John. The disciple that's not named. And it makes a great deal of emphasis later. And we'll explain that here in just a second. So Jesus is mocked. He's blindfolded and slapped. He's made a ridicule of. He's tortured basically without them really being able to torture him. And he's handed over to Pilate. Pilate sends him to Herod. Herod sends him back to him. Pilate's wife says, have nothing to do with this man. Don't even, just have nothing to do with him. That's why he's trying to get out of it, but he can't. And it says he handed him over to be scourged. Now, I don't know if you really looked into the scourge, but a scourge was a cat whip, had at least three branches on it. And on the end of these, they would tie anything from glass, pottery, metal, bone, whatever they could put on it. And it was designed for torture. It was designed to hurt the individual they're going to hit. And it says Jesus was scourged with that. We find then, after he's scourged, they mock and ridicule him again. They're going to have a purple robe. They're going to have a crown that's woven out of thorns. And I don't have it with me up here, but I have it in my office of what that possibly looked like. And then he was led out after all of this. And he was given his cross to carry. Now Mark says that he carried it all the way to Golgotha. The others don't say he didn't carry it to Golgotha, but Mark does. But we do know that Simon the Cyrenian was pulled from the crowd to carry his cross. So my thought on this is, since Mark says he carried it to Golgotha, I kind of picture that Simon helped him carry it, assisted him in it. Now, I don't think that Simon carried the whole thing by himself. I think he helped Christ, because that's the way it would have probably played out better. Jesus gets there. They lay him down. They take spikes and they put them through the bones that are in the wrist, because that's still considered part of the hand on both sides. Now, depending on how some view this, they could have put his feet together and drove it into the feet that way, or they could have put them on the side and drove it this way. As if that wasn't enough torture, they're going to hoist this up into the hole now that they've put him on this, and it's going to drop into that hole. And he is going to hang there. There are going to be 7 words, or 7 sentences that Jesus speaks throughout the entire time that he's on the cross, according to Scripture. One of those is so vastly important. Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. Only twice do we see that sentence, that statement made. Once Christ on the cross, once Stephen as he was being stoned in the book of Acts. He's going to be on that cross for several hours. He's going to be taken down after he is proven dead. They're going to wrap him with the spices, and they're going to put him in a tomb that wasn't even his. Joseph of Arimathea has allowed them to put him in there. They're going to roll the stone. They're going to take it, as they roll this stone, it's going to be sealed with the governor's seal, which means it is a Roman seal put upon that stone. Anyone that's going to be breaking into the tomb is going to be going against the Roman emperor and would be put to death. As if that isn't enough, the Pharisees go and they say, hey, we remember him saying that he would raise 3 days later. We need you to put a guard over there just so his people won't come and steal him by night and claim that that's what he did. And so they give him a Roman guard. We're not told how many of this guard, but these guards, I guarantee you, would be highly, highly trained, and they would be heavily armed. They would have more than just spears. They'd have more than just swords. They're going to have the full armament. And these men are going to be placed
there to watch this. And it says as that third day comes up, the stone rolls away, and those men, those highly trained Roman soldiers, became as dead men. Peter and John are going to come to the tomb. They're going to find the tomb empty. They're going to go back. And while they're together with the others minus one, Jesus appears to them in the upper room. Later, they're going to come. They're going to all be together, including the one that was missing. And Jesus is going to appear again. We call him Doubting Thomas, but I can guarantee you Thomas was not doubting. Thomas probably doubted himself, just like you and I have doubted ourselves. But he didn't doubt Christ, because he was the one, if you go back into John, you're going to find that it was Thomas that said, come, let us go to Jerusalem with him and die with him. That doesn't sound like a doubter to me. And so we're going to go in and we're going to see all of this take place. And why did it happen? Because Jesus loved us and allowed it to take place so that you and I can have life. That's what it's all about. And if we've been obedient to that doctrine, if we've been obedient to what God has given us, then there should be no reason we should not be thankful for our salvation. There should be no reason that we should not be thankful for what Jesus has done. Because without that death, without that burial, and without that resurrection, we have no salvation. And this morning I look at you and I ask, are you a Christian? If you're not, do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Are you willing to change your life from a life of sin to a life of righteousness? Are you willing to confess him before men? Are you willing to be immersed for the remission of your sins, calling on his name? For those of us that are Christians, are we living it? If we're not, why not do something about it through prayer, confession of sin, and repentance? You have that opportunity right now. Whether you need to become a Christian or whether you need to get right because you're not living as a Christian. Will you let us do something? Will you let us help? Step out. Come forward right now. While together we stand and sing this invitation song.
When we walk with the Lord.